And welcome to another Life Support Live, the weekly show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship captain with a notoriously Franco Anglo accent once said, and as another famous starship captain once said, who's about to come down the pike, wherever our mission takes us, we'll be sure to have a little fun along the way.
I always enjoy a little bit of punniness to start the day. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Ali Mattu.
Especially a little old punniness. And I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. Hey, Ali, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. And I am excited for today's topic. Today we are talking about, misjudging motivations, getting the wrong impression. We're talking about all of this sort of stuff, and we want to start things out by asking you, what is your favorite Star Trek episode about misjudging others, about getting your impressions completely wrong? But before let us know in the comments, and before we start diving into that, Larry, what are we doing here? If this is someone's first time at Life Support Live, what the heck is this whole thingy about?
Well, I'm glad you asked me, young man. No, well, we say life support is every week we are going boldly through uncertain times. So here we are. We're going to geek out about Star Trek through a mental health lens, if nothing else. We're going to geek out about mental health through a Star Trek lens. Take your pick. Because, one of us, Dr. Trek and Dr. Ali, is a real doctor. One of us.
You figured that out, though.
Yes.
It's more fun.
No, we'll have a lot of fun here. We've got several parts to the show. We're going to do our briefing room here and dance through some Star Trek examples. I believe you will have a counselor's log coming up, and then some away mission tips, away briefing tips for people real life. I have what we call the K3 factor, which is taking today's theme, or an example from today's theme, and just doing a good old Trekland deep dive into Star Trek canon background. So yeah, we've got a lot of fun stuff going on. And the chat is going. So if you are new to the show, we will be with you back and forth to the chat. We have hailing frequencies at the end. And yes, you can come in on camera. You can also just come in if you don't want to do camera. If you're a little shy, you can do audio with us. You can go beyond chat, or BC, as we say in the life support world.
Is that a thing we say? Okay, I guess
it is now.
Yeah, if you ever want to call into the show or video in, that is the account you want to message on Skype. And the comments are really coming in.
And if you're new, we take no responsibility, but we always point to, yes, the drinking game. How did you know I was going to go there?
I don't. Mine meld. Jared always likes to remind everyone, if we ever sing or do an impression, or if Ali drops a canon reference and fails, what? Or if Jared mentions Tapestry, my favorite episode, or Ali shows us one of his toys. I don't have. Yeah, I might have something new to show folks. So I'm fully caffeinated, ready to go. I got my Rectagino. So everyone, good to see you all back here. The examples are already coming in, Larry, about misjudging others and misjudging motivations of others. And we should say the reason why we are picking this topic, as we have been since the start of Star Trek Lower Decks, we take our weekly inspiration from the new episode of Lower Decks. We don't go into spoilers. And this week especially, we're not going to do that because there's just a lovely little reveal in this episode.
Right. The point I started to go for, and I thought, well, that'll be a spoiler. Oh, who cares anymore?
Who cares? It's 2020.
No, that's a spoiler.
kind of had
Stick
to
with our
reel my co-host back in. But this was a fun little episode, and it kind of begins with this moment where our lower deckers just really they're not really sure what's happening. They find themselves in this situation with aliens, and they're drawing from all the examples that they're familiar with to try to figure out what's happening, and they kind of keep messing up and they keep missing it. And so we thought that this would be a beautiful theme to go off of, because for many reasons it's hard to really understand the motivations of others right now. Larry, one of the things I found is
what have you found?
Hard. I found a lot, and I've also still am looking for a lot of things because I have no idea what's going on. But it's quite hard to just really read another person's emotions, especially when they're wearing a face mask. That's one thing. And like yesterday, I was getting some takeout and ran into apparently an old friend from high school, but we didn't really recognize each other because we both had these face masks on, and afterwards we texted each other, "Hey, was that you? Yeah, was that you? Oh,
who was that masked man?"
Yeah, who was it? Yeah, it was actually me. And it's also, you don't have a full read of everyone. It's hard behind a screen. There's lags. Lighting isn't great. Audio isn't great. When we see each other over screens, we're not really getting the whole picture.
I was gonna say, you're talking about our show. That's what you're talking
about. I'm talking basically about... I'm like... yeah, basically. And also, some of us aren't doing too well. Our mood is low. We don't feel like ourselves. There's so many reasons why it's hard to misjudge others. But let's talk about judging for a moment. Larry, what'd you think of this episode?
I loved it. Actually, I was engrossed. I laughed out loud 3 or 4 times. It continues the in-joke reference, or the Easter egg reference parade, as we insist on calling it now. But no, after it was done, I went back to think about the plot and realized it was actually it was a pretty complex show, because they kept using flashback, you basically had to get through 4 flashbacks within the arc of the show, the different point of view, it's like a Rashomon type, no, not totally Rashomon, but you had all 4 of the lower deckers' points of view to get through within a courtroom setting, which might not actually be a courtroom, but you had to get through testimony from 4 people. So you had 4 different sub-stories that all linked together, despite being told by 4 different people, that only were quasi-related to the ongoing plot. And I was like, well, that was actually kind of a complex structure not to get too deep on it, but but still
it
very
really
laughable.
was.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that episode. So there's 2 things. One, I really enjoyed that episode. I completely agree with you. It's probably structurally one of the most complex ones, and it also allowed all of our lower deckers to shine in their different ways with their different personality quirks. So I really enjoyed that.
We didn't have the A plot B plot separation this week. They were all in this together. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt, and in that way, it kind of felt very, very modern, and less of an homage to TNG, the A plot B plot, and more of its kind of own thing. One thing though, Larry, they keep mentioning the Enterprise D a lot, like a lot. I love the references and like the parade of references that you mentioned. However, Larry, it's a big universe out there. Can we get some references to Voyager? Can we get some references? I mean, we saw Deep Space Nine in a previous episode, but we haven't really had many references to Deep Space Nine. I'd like to get them a little bit less focused on the Enterprise D and that crew.
Well, Dr. Mattu, I've heard this from other people too, and what there's times when I kind of go as I'm watching a show go by, but the truth is the episodes are out there now, so they're done. Yeah. The ship has sailed.
Yeah.
So what we're left with to conclude is that we may think of it as like, well, that's the Star Trek show that was on for 7 years, and it was the sequel show that then begat the modern wave and set up the whole paradigm of a universe, not just these 3 guys on a ship in the 2260s. So by that, we have to look at it through their eyes, which means that it wasn't just a show we know. Picard and Data and Riker and Troy and all of that is like the Washington and Lincoln of their time, even though this is contemporary to Picard. And the events of Picard series haven't happened yet. So every time that happens, I kind of go, what you're left with as a viewer, as a fan, is to go, wow. And for a while, I was just chalking it up to Mariner. Like, she was the one that would go into the references. But this week, no, Boimler is bouncing off the walls with all the Trek references. That kind
Larry,
of blew it as a thing. But now, it's like it's the Tom Paris thing. Tom Paris is the big 20th century expert, and he keeps pulling. It's like, oh, how does this guy from the 23 whatevers know about Model T Fords and yada 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 yada, Christine and all that. That's just his thing, just like some people are Shakespeare buffs now.
And there's a lot of Shakespeare heads in Star Trek.
But at least in this case, it's like they're still contemporaries. And what it does to me then is it throws that much more weight on the Picard series. If this is what young officers are thinking about Picard, then he really blows it with the Mars blow up is what, 7 years away or whatever, and then the events of Picard are 12 years on that. So it's kind of like, here's the pinnacle of where he was and his crew was, and then now you see what happens almost 20 years later.
So, folks, our episode is about misjudging motivations. Maybe I have misjudged.
We wandered a little.
I think this is a good take, Larry. Every now and then you've got good takes on this little show called Star Trek, I must say. I really like. I like this perspective that what they're showing us is how important the Enterprise as the flagship of the Federation is to the Federation, and especially those years on the Enterprise D, that they kind of do live on in these stories that we have about George Washington in the United States, or about gosh, I'm really showing, my American is showing. I'm trying to think of examples that are more global. But these notable historical figures, and Picard has become one of those notable
Martin Luther,
figures.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Was there anything good out of medieval European history? I don't know. Or Asian history? I'm trying to... okay.
Right. We got maybe it's best to avoid those other examples. But I like that take, and I enjoyed that episode. And maybe this is a great way... I think I might have misjudged some of the motivations there, too. But let's jump into the briefing room. We've got so many great examples coming in from the chat about where people have kind of misjudged motivations. There's one episode I really want to start with, Larry, and it's one that I'm a huge fan of and has come up many times here in our chat.
Tapestry?
No.
I'm
saving that one.
Oh.
I want to talk about Darmok. Because when it comes to misjudging motivations, this episode seems like a wonderful example of all of the ways in which that can happen and why it can happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. Well, you start off with your typical. I was reading the chat. I'm not sitting here watching the OU game or anything else happening. I'm paying attention. It begins with your standard ship-to-ship confrontation about something, and quickly, and then you get into, oh my God, are we gonna have a Gorn down on the planet? We're gonna have some wacky fight. Mano a mano that we thought we'd left behind with the 60s. What is Next Generation doing when the captains are pulled down to a planet to, fight it out themselves? And that is not what happens. But you can tell good old diplomatic Picard is up to his eyeballs trying to keep this from being a Kirk moment.
Yeah.
And they finally do. But it totally turns on, it's a Joe Menosky special, totally turns on language. And that's this may have been the first episode, or the first one in a long time, that back in the day, watching these new each week, I thought, that is a show, that's not a murder mystery, it's not a court drama, it's not a comedy, it's not some format done the Next Gen way. That was truly a science fiction plot that couldn't have just been done on some, any other 1 hour drama, because it was revolving around language and alien language and etc.
Absolutely. It really is a episode that lets Picard shine in his more negotiator, ambassador, diplomat identity that we see with Picard. Well, we don't see him as an ambassador, except alternate futures, I guess. But yeah, all of those kind of things that that in other episodes we get scenes of it, or we see him and Troy talking about how are we going to approach this negotiation, or Picard I was on a panel many years ago with Rod Roddenberry, and he mentioned how Picard's always shepherding ambassadors around the galaxy. That always kind of stuck out of my head. I love that phrasing. But here we get to see him shine. We get to see all of his strengths in trying to overcome this communication gap that they have. And as this episode unfolds, you realize that this alien knew that this is the only way the two of them will be able to find a way to communicate and cooperate, and that is so important to this other individual. And we see, when it comes to misjudging motivations, we see the problem of language, especially when two people are coming to a situation with a very different meaning behind words. And in Darmok, we see a completely different way of communicating through storytelling and metaphor. And it seems so alien, but Larry, we do this all the time. We use metaphor all the time. We use shorthands for experiences that other people might not even know about. You and I could easily de-evolve the show into a Californian thing and start spitting out all these examples.
Or a Midwestern thing, or a
Midwestern thing, or an American theme.
I was going to say, we have a chat group here that's global enough that I find there's times when I have enough Portal 47 members and people on my different audiences that every once in a while somebody will say, okay, they misconstrue an American metaphor or trope or whatever, and you have to.
Yeah.
You just realize that we're not totally universal yet. No, I loved in Darmok. Basically, the bottom line was Universal Translator had no problem translating words.
Yes. But it's not a universal interpreter.
Got gibberish phrases and not gibberish words.
Yes. It's so, as a fan who's seen a lot of Star Trek, it's so satisfying to see the technology fail sometimes and to see it really push our characters. Because it lets you see how talented these folks are and how well trained and experienced they are, that they can still navigate these situations even if their universal translator is unhelpful in this moment.
Even if they're animated, yes.
Exactly. This is so we just love this episode. I think there's so much meat to this episode. We could spend our entire time talking about this.
One more thing about this episode was I was amazed at when there are parts that show a lot of good old Star Trek technology and there are a lot of Easter eggs in it, and I was like, they just keep hitting it out of the park as far as recreating, visual canon.
Are you talking about Lower Decks?
I'm talking about the Lower Decks episode. Yeah, Veritas.
Yeah. There was a lot. We saw a lot of ships.
We saw a lot of the good old Romulan bird of prey.
Oh my gosh!
A cloaked bird of prey, but it was just really done well. That there's a museum of ships or something on Vulcan of all things, and I was like, oh, there's a this, and not all Vulcan either. But
there's a very famous ship from a movie that won our poll this week. We had a poll about what movie to rewatch, to have a community watch, and Star Trek First Contact won the poll, obviously because it's an amazing movie, and there's a very famous ship from that movie in this museum. Oh yeah, right. And I saw it, and it made me so happy to see that ship. And some of those references they do in a way that it's not so overtly in your face, but if you've been watching for a while, you'll pick up on this stuff. And if you've been watching for a while, you might know
the theme.
Yeah, let's in terms of misjudging motivations, Larry, there's another episode that next to Darmok, this is the one that came up. Devil in the Dark. This is probably one of Anyone, when I usually talk to folks who have only seen the original series and watched it as it came up, this is one that always comes up in discussion.
This is
This
like a
is such
sleeper
a
that hardcore fans, I don't think about. Everybody goes to Muck Time and Sitting on the Edge and Mirror Mirror and all that, and people
yes.
overlook the Horde. But this is the one that I'll always know that when my kids were little, like when they were 4 and 5 and 6, this is the one Star Trek. Not that they'd seen a lot, or I didn't force it on them, but all the time they would. And I had stepkids when they were really little, and we were first in each other's orbit. They'd come to my house, and I had the tape library, and they would always say, "Play the Horda, play the Horda. We want to see the Horda."
Really?
Yeah, when they were 4, 5, 6, yeah. And they'd seen the Tribbles and a few other shows that I thought were good to show them. But they always wanted to see which I thought there's a thing there, because to me the Horda is scary if you're a little kid.
Yeah,
but it's like
I would have thought
enough
so.
of an overcoming
Huh. That's really interesting. I'll have to try that with my daughter in a year or two. She right now really loves the Wrath of Khan minus all the violence. We just skip through. We skip through.
You don't do the SETI eel in the ear.
No. And we have watched all of, from beginning to end, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and she loves that one because we're in Northern California, and she kind of recognizes some of the stuff, and she just has so much fun watching.
You've taken her to the
Voyage
Sausalito
Home.
Cetacean Institute.
I have. So there's a little bit of she's picking up on some of that stuff. Yeah. But Devil in the Dark, this is what I like about Darmok is it's about the challenge of communication. And what I like about Devil in the Dark is it speaks to what we see and our biases. Just even in your example right here, Larry. Well, doesn't it look scary? But the kids love it, and so completely misjudging how they might see it. And this episode is so much.
It does
about,
take out 2 or 3 red shirts of different shirt colors, not just
if
red.
If you're gonna watch some Star Trek, some red shirts are going down. I think that's just to be expected. I think someone did a bit of an academic study on red shirts, and apparently red shirts are no more likely to die in an original series episode than
per capita. I think they're looking at how many are assigned. Yeah, that's using the old original blueprints breakdown of the divisions, but still.
This episode gets to what our visual bias and and how people might look and our expectations around that. And I love that. And as since we're on the topic a little bit, since I alluded to Star Trek IV, and Tim said the one with the whales, Larry, let's talk about Star Trek IV, because there's a lot of misjudging motivations, especially with this moment right here with Star Trek IV. The communication. It's not a weapon.
Or lack thereof. Yeah.
Or lack thereof, exactly. This alien probe, it's not a weapon. It's trying to communicate, and it's not trying to communicate with the humans on Earth. Spock has that great line. What is it? Only
I'm sorry, can your father come to the door? Is your mother home?
Right.
Little kid humans? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's that kind of moment. What does Spock say? Spock says only human pride would lead you to think that this message is meant for them. There's like many intelligent species on Earth. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's a beautiful moment that Spock has. And when we're thinking about misjudging motivations, it seems like pretty much everyone but Spock was kind of misjudging the motivations of this probe.
Yeah, including everybody at Starfleet Command and the UFP. Yeah.
So I really love that, and you could also talk about later on Earth. It took a little bit of time for what is her name, Larry, the scientist, the whale expert.
Oh, Gillian. Yes, I kept wanting to say Gillian Anderson, Gillian Taylor. Taylor.
And
Gosh,
her character's name is.
Jillian.
Jillian? Jillian's the name of the character?
Isn't it? Oh,
Is it?
somebody's gonna
Someone's gonna let us know.
someone's going to excoriate me here.
This is the problem with doing the show Saturday morning. We haven't quite woken up.
Yeah.
But she doesn't quite believe Kirk at first, and she believes he's a part of the military. And to her credit, Kirk and Spock just look like such fish out of water, and they can't even get themselves to Sausalito by themselves. You know, they don't know what's going on. Yeah, okay, Jillian, yes. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for clearing that up. So, misjudging the motivations there of Kirk and Spock, especially when Spock goes down and like mind melds with the whale. Of course, they're looking at that from their own perspective and thinking, "What the heck is going on? Is this
They are
person
not
trying
the
to
hell,
hurt
you're
the whale?"
whales.
Spock, no one really believes you. No one takes you seriously if you don't use any colorful metaphors here. Was Star Trek 4 on our watch list this week for the poll? Larry, did we put Star Trek 4?
I don't think so. Maybe it was. I know First Contact and something else. Was there another movie? Anyway.
If it's not, we're gonna have to do a watch of that because it's just too much fun to watch that movie. So I think that's another really great example here. Let's jump around the canon a little bit, Larry.
Well, one that, and I didn't pull an image from it. I almost did, but it was going to be a little hard to display. That whole the Horta riff you were on about playing with our cultural expectations of what is good and bad and all that.
Yeah.
And the one that comes to mind, even though it's only a Voyager, is the Voyager episode, not the movie, but the Voyager episode Nemesis, where the whole thing is played on, it's told through Chakotay's eyes, I think, mainly. But the whole point of the show is the scary-looking guys are the good guys, and the normal humanoid-looking guys are the bad guys, and it totally messes with Janeway and the crew. It's like a Lower Decks thing, where Chakotay is the lower decker, and the command crew is blithely dancing along with the bad guys thinking they're the good guys, but it's because the bad guys look like Delta Quadrant Nausicaans. I mean, they have the scary mouth treatment and all of that, right?
Right. Very much in need of a bath.
It's a perfect slap on the wrist about, don't let your cultural biases, play into,
that episode sort of reminds me of that great Twilight Zone episode where the person is injured and disfigured, and the doctors try their best to a little bit of a Tellarite-ness there at the end, but the doctors say like, "I'm sorry, we couldn't do anything," and then they take the bandages off and say, "Oh, she's hitting." Oh, people are like gasping. Oh my gosh! And when she's revealed to have a lot of traditional.
She's just
a traditional
human
appearance of beauty, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean she's not just human, but she looks very beautiful by the standards of the time. And the cameras turn to the doctors, and the doctors look like Tellarites a bit. It's
but at least they all had their masks on, so that's something to say.
They did, even in that Twilight Zone era.
Lesson for today, yeah.
Well, on the topic of Voyager, let's dive into another episode. This is an episode, Larry, I really enjoy a lot. Living Witness is the episode here.
Can you go to the one with the people in it?
That is the one with the people in it.
No, the one with the people. There's one with them they're in the mess hall, or not the mess hall.
Oh, that moment. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you meant the other one. This moment.
That one, yes, yeah.
Yes.
The one that's not the K3 picture. Okay.
So this image, or this episode, for those of you who don't remember, is an episode where the Doctor wakes up in this future museum, and part of his program has been saved in this like exhibit, and there's this exhibit to the Voyager crew, and all their facts are kind of wrong. There's some truths there, but they're kind of like twisted in a way. And this gets to misjudging motivations in terms of looking back at history and getting the information wrong and misunderstanding.
It's like taking a dinosaur skeleton and trying to
Yes.
extrapolate what it looked like and having it be comically wrong. You know.
Right, right. Dinosaurs do not look like the way they look like in Jurassic Park. They actually look a bit more bird-like and had feathers. That's. I think that's a great parallel here, Larry. Not only because it makes me think of one of my favorite Voyager episodes, which is Distant Origin, but it
Mm-hmm.
also it's a real-world problem. Like I grew up with those images of the dinosaurs the way we see them in Jurassic Park, and it's just doesn't reflect what our current thinking is about what dinosaurs probably look like. Very similar thing is playing out here in Living Witness is misjudging the motivations of the past. And the past is always alive in the present. And if we don't really understand where some of these problems originated from, we're not really well equipped to deal with the way they play out in present day.
Even when you think you're building off of clues and you think you're an educated, you think you have good resources and good background, and you're having to extrapolate from something without a living witness there to tell you. Even in that, there was a little bit of internal political reality going on for that, called the Kyrians, I think, for that world. And it's that whole episode is just bizarre. It's kind of like the Silverblood alien episodes. It's like a completely fish out of water point of view. We're on a planet hundreds of years in the future where the original Voyager crew has died. Whatever happened to Voyager, they're dead by now. And you're watching a backup of the Doctor talk about everybody, but they've been totally misrepresented on this planet where the Voyager crashed, supposedly, or his left behind. But their input in this planet was a total, here's why we have here's how we have the Prime Directive. Totally affected this world, but they've gone on for another few hundred years beyond that, interpreting what the Voyager, interaction with their culture meant, and having it all wrong, and suddenly having this backup copy of the Doctor who was there. It's like thawing the guy out of ice and having him come to life, and tell you. It's like the 2,000-year-old man without Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner. But anyway, it's a totally one of those, a totally not ordinary shows. But yeah, it's a great lesson in.
It's a great lesson.
Things are misinterpreted, but also how that misinterpretations play into political, contemporary political hands. But
yes, even from hundreds of years ago.
Yes.
Brian has a really great comment here. That's one of the best things about Star Trek, the concept that the unknown or the other is not necessarily your enemy. And then Libby followed that up with, or someone with totally different views. And I just had this... Values, values, yes. Larry, have you ever had this moment where you and someone else are having a conversation, you're reminiscing about something that might have happened 10, 20 years ago, and you both have a completely different view of what happened? I just had this moment last night, actually. I was talking to my dad, and we were talking about there's this my family moved from one town to another when I was in second or third grade, and I hated it because I was a socially anxious kid. I had a very hard time making new friends when we moved, and it felt like it took 3-4 years for me to even recover from that. And then my dad brought up the idea that of moving again to another neighborhood. And I was in middle school at this time. And I remember telling my dad, no, I don't want you to move. I'm really settled in well to this school now. I have friends. I don't want to leave all that. We were talking about that, and my dad said, I don't remember the conversation going that way. I remember you threatening me, crying and screaming and threatening that if we move, you are going to completely give up on school, and you're going to intentionally fail all of your classes, and you're going to be, you're just going to throw your future away. And I'm like, I don't remember saying that at all. I have no memory of ever saying something like that. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. There's probably aspects of truth to both, but our memory is not perfect. Memory changes. Our memory is more like Wikipedia articles. They can be edited by future information. People can come in and change it. And who knows what was actually true back then. This kind of stuff, like we see in Living Witness, happens all the time. Absolutely, it happens all the time.
Yeah, no, you asked me if I remembered that, and I one that finally popped into mind just happened a few years ago, the reminiscing. But we were shooting talking people for my documentary, the Connor Raff. Mm-hmm. And one of my best friends was, and I'm personally involved. This is my documentary about an infamous meltdown convention, the first big one really that happened in the 80s in Houston. And there's a personal string to the story for me as well as the big picture too, because I had three friends and two friends and my little brother. But when we first arrived and we kind of were flung into the chaos that was happening that we talk about with everybody, I was reminding or talking about going back and forth between two venues. And my friend, as we were on camera, as he was on camera talking, he goes, he goes, oh, that's right. You kept running off and we kept wondering where you were going and you kept coming back. I didn't know you were in the room where all the stars were and everything was I didn't know that. And I'm like, well, I kept coming back. I didn't run off and leave you. But it was kind of like, oh, that was just 5 years ago. And we got into a collision of the memories. But yeah, it was, it's a really odd moment when you suddenly, especially if it's somebody you know and it's not some stranger, it's someone you know and trust, like you and your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. These moments happen all the time. Dan actually just completely took the idea or the words right out of my mouth, where he said, each time you remember something, your brain remakes the memory. So many errors make sense. And Brian also said, memory is constantly being reconstructed. And Victoria said it's hard to figure out what's the truth. And all of these things are absolutely true. Every time you do think of something, you are recreating that memory. And what's in your head at this time, what you're seeing around you, your new memories, all of this stuff changes how we remember things.
I said Rashomon, I was kidding, but Star Trek had its Rashomon. In fact, Phil Barnes, hello Phil, if this is your first time with us, maybe not. He threw out A Matter of Perspective, which is kind of a clunky episode of Next Generation, but the point being, it's the classic of it is a trial, and all the witnesses are remembering things slightly differently, and some of them have an agenda, and some of them are just sincerely, misremembering. It's also, was it Ex Post Facto? Did the same. Yeah. Oh, look, it's another Voyager that's rehashing a Star Trek plot. Yeah.
Shh! Don't tell anybody that.
Sorry. Spoilers.
That's what Voyager did.
Spoiler from 1995. Okay.
Well, but Jared mentions that too. This is why eyewitnesses to crimes can't be trusted 100%. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the way witnesses are asked questions can have a huge impact on how they're remembering information. So absolutely, it's hard. William, hello. William says, "Hi guys, Bill and Ron from Netherlands here." Mm-hmm. Hi, welcome to the show. We love seeing new faces, and we also love seeing people from the whole global community.
Especially
here.
As little as I think we promoted the show this week.
There's another one here, Larry. Let's jump in. I think what's cool about the examples we pulled this week, they're all capturing different aspects of misjudging motivations. So I want to dive into this one. When I brought this one in our prep, and you're like, interesting example, Ali.
You mean 30 minutes of texting last night?
Prep? Shh. Don't tell them our secret strategy of prep.
Don't mention the war. Okay.
But this episode right over here, with the nanites, this is such a beautiful episode of TNG for me, because this was one of the first. I saw TNG a bit out of order when it was first airing. I saw part of it in syndication, and then part of it I saw out as it was airing first run. So I think I saw this episode before I saw Measure of a Man. I think Measure of a Man speaks to some of these similar topics. What's the name of this episode again, Larry, with the nanites? I know it's not called
Evolution.
Evolution, is that what it's called?
So.
So in this episode, we see a human-made creation that is made to just go and repair different parts of the ships. And what Data uncovers, which also makes this such a wonderful, in some ways, a sequel to Measure a Man, or at least an evolution of the themes brought up in Evolution
Or
of
at
a
least a
Man.
prequel to the exocomps, which are nanites just a little bit larger.
That too, yeah, that too. Maybe am I thinking of the exocomps? I might be thinking of the exocomps episode. Am I
With
describe?
the scientists that develops them, and they're meant to be like little firefight, like take on the
Yes,
robot.
that's what I thought I was describing. Am I describing two
Nanites
different?
were developed to, they're always talking about using them in surgery. Well, we talk about them now.
Yeah,
Nanites are going to be our microscopic surgical repair, and then they get adapted for, the Borg are using them as nanoprobes. That's what nanoprobes are, tiny nanites in Borg, infrastructure. So
I think I was talking about the exocomps. Oh my gosh. I hate it when I do this. This happens, folks, this happens all the time. I
you
start
should call your
describing.
doctor, and
Yeah, I should.
get you straight.
My memory. See, my memory. This happens all the time where I describe part of an episode and Larry's like, oh yeah, you're describing this. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, that's what I'm describing. And then I continue to describe it and Larry's like, no, you're actually describing two episodes. You've combined them. Oh man, I cross the streams all the time.
Conflation.
Well, I was thinking...
The dopey game where you're mixing up Star Trek episodes. Yeah.
Let's play what episode Ali is talking about.
What episode?
So I was talking about the Exocomp episode where Data discovers that these machines are actually alive. They're self-aware. They're trying to protect themselves. They're evolving. All this stuff is happening. And here's an episode where misjudging motivations comes into play in terms of self-preservation and self-awareness. Things that most of the other sentient life forms here are not picking up, but Data is. And maybe Data's a bit more sensitive to it because people have questioned his sentience and his self-awareness. And Data's coming into it with a different perspective. I love the Exocomp episode. And that was the episode I actually wanted to mention.
Even though the guest scientist that week is kind of clunky, and they named her Dr. Farallon, which was I was like, really, guys, really, okay. Which maybe it's out, but in the '90s, Farallon was a computing software company.
Brian asks, Ali cross the streams or did he jump the timeline? I think I did a little bit of both. I did not jump the ravine, though, as we see in Star Trek Generations, which crossed the streams and jumped the timeline. Generations does both of those things.
That's a baton. That's handing off the... Get your metaphor straight. That was passing the baton, not crossing.
I was saving the galaxy while your grandfather was in diapers. Was that the line?
No, that's Scotty. Isn't it?
Scotty?
I can hear Scotty
Am I doing it again?
I can just hear Scotty saying diapers. So anyway. No, you're right. He does say that. It's just that diapers just conjures up Scotty saying diapers.
That's a great wacky Scotty. I love that, Larry. There we go, folks. I'm gonna have some more of my Rectigino here.
I know we need to move along, but I also have the sense that there's so much going on in the chat that I'm ignoring here.
Yeah.
Victoria's mentioned the ship. Jared says duet.
Duet is a wonderful.
Here says beginning of Star Trek Beyond with the little aliens, whatever the hell they were.
The beginning of Star Trek Beyond reminded me a lot. The Lower Decks episode this week reminded me a lot of the beginning of Star Trek Beyond. There's a similar camera trick at play.
Mm-hmm. Which they didn't even get into with the courtroom in Star Trek VI, but it's also meant to evoke the Klingon court in Star Trek VI. Yeah, which Tim Hands points out. Well, the thing about Cairo talks about symbiosis, misjudgment, where they first think it's a medical situation, turns out to be a drug business. Um, Victorious is the Corbomite maneuver, which is what I was pointing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
In our prep talk, except that the Corbomite maneuver is another case. We got into this before about false. We were talking about fake news,
False
whatever.
beliefs.
But Corbomite maneuver, Baylock is intentionally trying to be misleading.
Yeah.
It's not on.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Kirk and company are misjudging motivations completely because that's exactly what they're wanting to do. They're being manipulated to be there. It's not just on.
There's a spectrum
the Horda
here.
is not trying to hide anything. The Horda is just being the Horda.
There's a spectrum here between believing something that might not be accurate to sharing something that might not be accurate to sharing something that is actually disinformation and designed to get people to believe false things, kind of like it's like propaganda. It's engineered to get people to believe things that aren't true, to targeted campaigns to really affect people's beliefs. There's a whole spectrum here, and I think that falls a bit more on the spectrum of intent. There's more intent there with Corbomite maneuver.
Yeah. So I'm just scanning back through the chat so far.
Here's the quote, Larry. Here's got the quote. I was driving starships while your great-grandfather was still in diapers.
It's the Geordie line from Relics. That's what it is. I was trying to put it in a late movie, but that's it. Yeah.
I love that episode. I love
yes,
Relics.
your generation's memory was. I was thinking you were right. I was just trying to remember where the diapers came from. Anyway, we have a show to do. I'm sorry. I should be working on a show, and my mind keeps going into Star Trek trivia. I can't reconcile
diapers.
This is horrible.
What's the Kirk line then from Generations? I was out saving the galaxy while.
Yeah.
While what?
You were in diapers? No.
No, because that was Scotty.
That's what I'm saying.
I was driving starships while your grandfather was still in diapers. I think you'd be a little grateful for some help. I'll leave you to your work, Mr. LaForge.
Yeah, that's the Relics line. Okay.
Whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm crossing the streams, and I'm jumping the timeline. Sorry,
this is all within Star Trek. Linda says Enterprise is the cogenitor. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Enterprise, because I think Enterprise does this really well. So, Larry, one
observation on that generally is the more we talked about this misjudging motivations, what is that a key factor in? What's the big Star Trek concept? And because it kept coming up in Cerritos, not just the fact that it's comic gold. It's the kind of thing that you make comedy out of. Oh, I misjudged this, said the plot of 47,000 million sitcoms. Misjudging motivations is the big fear you avoid in First Contact. And First Contact is such a part of communication, and everything from the Horda on down. The Horda was a first contact with Janusians.
Yeah,
if you want to say that.
Absolutely.
But since that's a thing, we keep coming into all these plots where misjudging motivations is key to something going wrong. First contact gone wrong is because of misjudging motivations.
Yes.
In the first contact.
And for all the reasons that we've mentioned. And for all the reasons we've mentioned, and this is something I want to talk about in a little bit once we get into the counselor's log, is we all experience these types of first contact situations all the time. Now, maybe it's not the first contact between two different sentient species, but first contact with a person who you haven't met before, first contact with a new community or a group of people. This happens on the internet all the time, where we're encountering all sorts of people, who we have no context for. We don't know what culture they're coming from, what understanding of history they have, how they communicate, their metaphors.
Your first time in a foreign country or a new foreign country. Outside.
Yeah. I mean, first time in a different part of town that you haven't been in before. There's so many ways in which we encounter people with whom we have no context of understanding their lived experience. This happens all the time. And all of our great first contact stories from Star Trek are wonderful examples of that. Speaking of Enterprise, Larry, all the Andorian human Vulcan storylines are really wonderful for this, especially Archer and Shran. Their evolution and their understanding. We talked about friends last week, and a friend that really helps you grow, and we used them as an example. But boy, their relationship started in a place of very much misjudging motivations.
Started with, Andorian disruptor to the head is where it started.
Right. Yeah. And the Andorians were looking at humans based upon the human alliance with the Vulcans. And they did not have a good relationship with the Vulcans. So they really assumed that the motivations of humans were very much the same as the Vulcans. And then humans are like, whoa. We're not besties. We're kind of stuck with the Vulcans.
We just rode here together, guys.
Right. They've just been kind of helping us, but also not. And we just got this new Warp 5 vessel, so like we're just excited to meet all the new people.
What's going
on here? Yeah.
We're just out with. No, you've hit on a very important pivot here for Star Trek development, because you touch on this whole Andorian, Vulcan, human triangle, and you once you realize that moment, you totally get it. Why we never have any Tellarite episodes.
Oh, can we add that to the drinking game, Jared, when Larry makes a sad reference to the lack of Tellarite representation in Star Trek?
I love how when they developed that conflict, that the lovers triangle of the Andorians thrown in with the Vulcan human dynamic was such a great it's one of the greatest contributions of Enterprise is to throw early Federation, human history, galactic history through that prism, and you go, oh, and it's a wonderful triangle to play off of.
Yeah.
The downside is it's like there's no room in this love story for the Tellarites, and they
Anyway. I would say there's two things I'm sad about. One is we didn't get to explore as much of that, and Dan mentioned the Xindi, and I think the Xindi are a very good example of misjudging motivations.
I brought that up last night.
You did, and there's a great arc that happens there over the course of that season. What bums me out about the Xindi arc is it also took a lot of real estate away from more episodes about the Federation, the founding of the Federation, which we get in season 4. But I really wish.
Save the show.
Yeah, I know. I do. What I think is so interesting about Tellarites. I'm gonna give you. I never do this, Larry, but I'm gonna give you my my love list of why I think the Tellarites are an amazing species. I like to poke fun at the Tellarites, but the Tellarites serve an incredibly important role in this group, and that role is of honestly speaking to the elephant in the room. I just dropped a cultural idiom there that might not make sense outside of America. They're speaking to that issue that is a really important issue that other people might be afraid to talk about or
don't want to talk about it. Right.
Don't want to talk about it. Yeah. If anyone has seen the new Challenger, the Final Mission documentary on Netflix, it's really quite good, and it explores what was the human psychological failure behind the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. And it comes down to people were not listening to dissenting voices. And the Tellarites serve that very important function in every team, which is let's make sure we're listening to everyone's ideas, even the ideas that might be challenging or uncomfortable or make us feel not so good about ourselves. The Tellarites serve that role far more than humans or Andorians or Vulcans do. And gosh, I wish they did get more screen time, because I love that idea. Is how can we make it safe to hear dissenting points of view? It's really important.
Well, and they are introduced. Gosh, I just had another insight. I love it when you learn something new every day. Are you enjoy? It's we come out of the original series with all these things like little statues, these people and concepts as little statues, and one of them is Vulcans, good, Vulcans, peaceful, rational, good, and Enterprise started off, and there are some parts that I was kind of like, you've ruined the Enterprise. We have to fix the Vulcans with the whole trilogy in the fourth season. But by the time Discovery comes around, the strongest thing about Discovery so far to me, and it drove people crazy, not so much about Burnham being shoehorned in as this foster daughter that we never knew about, but how they've layered onto Sarek, and by extension Sarek and his family, and the thing that nobody wanted to look at about Sarek was married to 2 human women. How many other Vulcans what the hell kind of pioneer outcast / pioneer was Sarek in his own culture? He was this high muckety muck. He was an ambassador, yada yada, but he did seem like he traveled more. Now when you go back and look at all this, Sarek seems like he was a Federation ambassador. He wasn't just a Vulcan ambassador running around serving Vulcans. It's almost like he's the, I don't know, and this will sync with a lot of folks. When you're a stranger in your own, not a stranger in a strange land, when you're a outcast among your own people, maybe, or not an outcast, but you feel that way.
Yeah.
That where my mind goes to is so many people I know who are on the who are gay or on the queer continuum, who grew up in some rural, for lack of a better word, a red state. And by the time they get to college, they go to college and they go to New York or LA or San Francisco or Denver, Houston. They go to some big urban area, probably far from home and probably out of their own home state. And I always get that feeling that that's like a metaphor going on here for Sarek. He had 2 human wives. Apparently, at least if he wasn't married to her, he had a kid with a Vulcan priestess. Now, thank you, Cybok story, retconned it. And in the middle of all that, he's raised a human,
stepchild,
taken on a human foster daughter because she was orphaned.
Or foster
daughter. Right. People keep saying Spock's got a sister, and it's like, no, he has it's a family.
The family's complicated. Yeah.
It's not like Sarek and Amanda hid a kid that they had together. No, they took it. But then that's the thing. Sarek and Spock never talked about Cybok. So the example was set for the whole kerfluffle about Michael. At first, I was kind of going, this is so derivative and duplicative, and do we have to go over this ground? But by the time and God bless them, the poor Discovery Season 1 writers, whoever was in the office that week, whoever was on the payroll before it changed again. But that's one thing that show did the first season was give a whole 15 more layers to Sarek and Sarek's family. And
yes,
what I got off on this tangent was to get back to our talk about Tellarites and the picture we got in Journey to Babel that sat stagnant for so long about Andorians and Tellarites both, and then Enterprise started to finally flesh it out a little bit, mainly on the Andorian side, but still is all this. And the thing that Sarek does a disservice when he's part of it is the punching bag of the moment. But when he says Tellarites do not argue for a reason, they simply argue, which was very belittling. And so for 40 years, it's like, oh, Tellarites, worse than Ferengi about being launched and then abandoned. At least the Ferengis finally got Quark. And I know I'm on a tangent. I'm going to shut up real quick. But my point here is Enterprise gave the ability not just what you had said about that, but showing that it's not just that Tellarites have arguing as a fetish or some kind of character flaw, but that they've fleshed out a little bit more to show that debate is an art form with them. What logic is to a Vulcan and combat is to a Klingon, debate is to a Tellarite. And some people go, oh, politicians, they can say whatever, they can make whatever they need to have happen sound like it's, they can mealy mouth anything. And you can badmouth debate, but debate can also be clarifying. And I'd never thought of it what you just said about being the one to bring up the elephant in the room, the idiom again. So anyway, I know we got off on a thing. This is supposed to be misjudging.
Well, but no, I'm gonna tie it together. I'm gonna tie it together, and say that it's the Tellarites are a beautiful example of the theme we're talking about. They are. I referenced them.
Okay.
Yeah. This was all part of. Someone mentioned the Joker earlier in the comments. This is all part of the plan. It was completely intentional. That no, I just did. I not only did it take us out of Star Trek, I took us way out into comic books and Heath Ledger's Joker. The thing I was going to say here is, I mentioned the Tellarites in reference to the Twilight Zone episode, and the appearance of something that is so far removed from these ideas we have about human beauty that they look like pigs, which is kind of a very insulting thing to say to a human, right? And to have your immediate judgment is this is repulsive, that they are they don't care for social rules, they are argumentative, you don't want to be near them.
They're also arrogant.
They're arrogant, yeah. But they also hold some of the most important strengths that we need in groups, and for groups to function well and to flourish. You need someone who's going to argue with you these points before you make a big decision. And if we had more people like that at NASA, the Space Shuttle Challenger might not have blown up. If we had more people like that in the room, John F. Kennedy might not have invaded the Bay, and we wouldn't have had the Bay of Pigs disaster. There are so many big examples of that where we didn't have Tellarites in the room. We didn't have someone who said, hold on. Have you thought about all of these things that can go wrong? Hold on. What are we missing here? Mm-hmm. Do you have any experience related to this community that you're talking about? Or are you just pulling examples from stereotypes and movies that you have? I argue that we probably need a little bit more Tellarite intellectual humility. And while they might be arrogant socially, they do have this intellectual humility where they don't necessarily believe that everyone knows exactly what they're talking about, So I think we all need a little bit more of that intellectual humility right now.
Well, if I had known we were going to go I would have had an awesome K3 for today if I'd known our conversation was going to take this turn. But instead,
you can always do it audible.
No. This is too good a one. So I'm just going to file this one away, and I'll save it.
Don't file it.
In the next 47 years of Life Support Live, we will come back to tolerance.
No, Larry, just don't file it in the Trek files, because that's your other show with your other friend. Save it for Life Support Live.
Okay.
We're claiming that one.
Pinky swear. Okay.
Pinky swear. There we go. Yeah. Speaking of American cultural idioms that no one else is going to understand.
Thank goodness I had 80s movies where I never would have known what pinky swear was. Teen. I had no idea what pinky swear was.
Oh, gosh.
I'm trying to catch up. And after that, I'm going to take a rest after that rant. But I'm so glad.
It's a good rant.
Scotty, you just earned your pay for the week. I'm so glad you took my rant there. But I was trying to be revelatory. I just didn't think it was going to have anything to do with our topic. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
See how political you are? You can take anything and make it relevant.
Yeah, Cairo's got a little bit of a away mission for us. Yeah, you need someone in the room playing devil's advocate. Yeah. So one of the best ways to address this, and this is a problem called groupthink, where people are sort of... I
was actually thinking of I wish there were Tellarites in the LBJ Vietnam room and the Iraq room.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. We won't even get into contemporary examples because that list is way too long and way too difficult and emotional. But one of the best ways to deal with this is actually to appoint someone to be the quote-unquote devil's advocate. If you're not familiar with that term, it means someone who's arguing against what everyone else is saying, and actually designating someone to have that role in a meeting kind of lifts the pressure off of going against the group. And if that's their job for this meeting, is to kind of argue against and think about other things that might be missed, it makes it a little bit easier. The other thing, Larry, the question to always ask in these situations is, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen if we make that decision and really dive into it? That's always another great strategy to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, newspapers and a lot of other organizations and structures have ombudsmen that do that very thing. And the government is supposedly having independent inspector generals who are supposed to fulfill that, that mission too, if they're not all gutted. But yeah, no, that's a you have the designated hitter or the designated hit backer or whatever, hitter back.
Yes.
Yeah. Who takes it. But yeah, you're right. They take all that. That's their job. So no one can attack them supposedly not attack them for being the contrarian. Right.
So, should we, Larry, we could keep talking about the canon here. There's one more example I just want to share just before we get into...
I feel like I sent you some more images we should maybe hit.
You did, and this is the one. This is the last one.
Oh, this was yours. This was yours.
Yeah, this was mine. So I do think there's some misjudging motivations here in terms of Section 31. We see in the very first episode of Section 31 in Deep Space Nine where Bashir has very much misjudged the motivations of Sloan. Now, I know Sloan is intentionally deceiving Bashir, but there's this aspect of misjudging.
He's trying to out Garrick there.
Yeah, he is. That was another favorite example of mine in our prep, is we were thinking about Garrick, and we're like, is there an example here from Garrick? And then we're kind of like, well, it's like every example with Garrick is misjudging motivations in every moment and permutation of Garrick.
Go back to the beginning when they're trying to figure out who he is, and that was everybody else versus Garrick is what I meant. But yeah.
Gosh, this is the problem with Deep Space Nine examples. Once you start unraveling the tapestry of Deep Space Nine examples, you can spend hours and hours going over them. Jared, that was one for you, a little reference for you. Misjudging motivations can come into play when you might be deceived and not really knowing that you're being deceived. That's kind of where I wanted to go with this. And this is very much a challenge, Larry, for us right now, where when we see information on social media or on YouTube, how many times have folks, especially with, this has become an increasing problem with Star Trek, is there's a lot of really intense videos on YouTube, and what's the motivation of these? Of why are these out there? And it's very hard to know.
Are you talking about toxic Trek YouTubers?
Yes, I am. And it's very hard to know what are the motivations. Why are people creating this stuff? Do they actually believe these things, or is this just a wonderful way to get views? Like, there is a formula to having very successful YouTube videos. Enrage people. You can title something "The Truth About Blah Blah Blah" and promise that you're going to reveal this truth that no one else really knows, and leave people very angry about something. Those videos do very well, and you can make those. And why are people creating this
It
content?
Sounds scary. What's really scary is if someone took that kind of a concept out of Star Trek and, applied it to politics. Now, that would be scary.
Larry, now don't get silly here. That would never happen.
Okay, thank God. Okay, yeah, let's just keep it
Help us, people. Help us in America. We're really struggling.
Just keep that within the play, But seriously, this was not my universe at all. This was not my realm at all. But I heard about it on the side, and in the 2 and 3 and 4 years since, it's like this all started with Gamergate.
Yeah. That was
not a gamer,
good example of it.
But I would hear these things about male misogynistic gamers tearing down, female game columnists and game reviewers and I'm like, what the heck is gaming? I didn't remember gaming being such a, has the gaming world exploded so much with mass popularity that the game industry is bigger than the movie industry by box office and all that? is it gotten so big that there's this huge misogynistic streak in it? But now I see it through the eyes of what's happened everywhere else and go,
Yes.
that was artificially blown up to where people knew something had changed, and so suddenly it was this big scandal. But really, it was people getting in, and all you had to do was double the amount of negativity, and suddenly it's still a minority, but it's now twice as big as it used to be, so it's very noticeable, and it makes the feeling of things going to the shits. I mean,
it's weaponizing. It's
yes.
weaponizing information for purposes of profit or for purposes of propaganda and persuasion. And why I think this relates to misjudging motivations is we might not even know someone is trying to manipulate us. And that's why it connects to Section 31 and that episode with Julian Bashir. He saw Sloan in one way, and Bashir had really the best interests in that very first episode of Section 31, and he had no idea until it's revealed at the end of how much he was being manipulated. He was going through this test, and things, he thought he was approaching it in the good Starfleet officer way that he should, but he had no idea what was actually happening and what the true motivations were. So I think this is one of the most difficult examples.
He brought a hand phaser to a ship phasers fight.
Right. Oh my gosh. Before we go into the counselor's log here, Jared is saying locations that were nominated for Life Support Live Retreat in 2021 but didn't work out: Conception Junction, Missouri; Rough and Ready, California; Knockemstiff, Ohio; Hooker, Oklahoma; Beaver Crossing, South Dakota.
I've driven through Hooker, Oklahoma. Yeah. It's not nearly as exciting as the...
Oh, we will move right along to the counselor's log. So, Larry, the counselor's log, this is a chance for us to do a little bit of a deeper dive into why some of these problems occur, and for me to use my background in psychology to kind of explain some of this stuff. And there's one idea that clearly came up, and this is a fundamental idea, actually, in psychology, and specifically social psychology. It's called the fundamental attribution error. It's such a basic thing that happens in so many situations that it's in the title of this concept, the fundamental attribution error. What it basically means, yeah.
But as you enter this wonderful topic, can you go solo screen and let me check on something really quickly?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Let me, I'm going to boot you off.
I don't want to interrupt your
flow. See
you
in a bit. No worries,
okay,
no
worries.
I'll be right back. So what I want to talk about with the fundamental attribution error is this is exactly what happens when, let's say you're driving in a car and you're running late and you're speeding and maybe you cut someone off. And maybe you feel bad about it for a moment, but then you say, well, I'm in a hurry. I really have to get to this job interview, or I have to go pick up my kid. I have to go meet someone, whatever it might be. When we do things, we make a lot of situational explanations for why we're doing that. Well, the reason I did this is because I'm running late and I need to pick up that person, and if I don't, then there's going to be all these bad things, and the reason I'm running late is because all this other stuff was happening in my day, all that kind of thing. So for ourselves, we make a lot of situational explanations. But if we're driving and someone else cuts us off and we get angry, well, that person is an a-hole. Well, that person is a bad driver. Well, that person doesn't know what they're doing. We make a lot of dispositional explanations for other people's behavior. We do something bad, we explain away why we're doing something bad. Someone else does something bad, they did something bad because they're a bad person. That's the fundamental attribution error. We also do this for people that we're very close to, or we are friends with, or love. It's much easier for us to make explanations of why people might do things the better we know them. Whereas if we know people less, we blame them for why they're doing all this sort of stuff. If you have any good examples of the fundamental, I was about to call it the Federation attribution error. That's not it. If you have any good examples of the fundamental attribution error, I want to see them in the comments below. So the question comes up, why? Why do we do this? Well, we talked in a past episode, a long time ago. I had people close their eyes and imagine an apple and what color is it, and you bite into the apple. Do you see the core? And this was an example of schemas. Our memories are actually generalities, and our memories are related to basic examples of experiences we've had. And so when it comes to this concept of the fundamental attribution error, it's the problem is really we don't know a lot about other people. Our memories and ideas about other people are so basic compared to our memories and ideas about ourselves. Our memories about ourselves are this very complex web that has so many different experiences there. And similarly with people we're very close to, but people we don't know, our memories and ideas about them are often based upon what we see in pop culture, basic examples from history, stereotypes, and other biases. Mm-hmm. We just don't have a lot of information on other people.
Especially stereotypes and biases.
Especially, yeah, and the less we know
that's the definition of what they are. We extrapolate to the, yes.
Yes, and Larry, especially the less we know about someone, or the very first time we're coming into contact with them, are these first contact examples, all we have are stereotypes to go mm-hmm. off of. That's all we have, our knowledge about other people. So this is one of the most basic problems we have when it comes to misjudging motivations, is the fundamental attribution error. Larry, you ever run into this? I'm sure you've experienced this. I experience this all the time.
Gosh, no. I've never misjudged anything on first glance. I don't know. Do you want to switch us? Do you want to flip? Can you flip us back to our?
I think I can flip us back. I'm gonna. Whoa! There we are.
Okay.
We're back here. So yeah, I'm checking the comments section here. If anyone has had any experience with the fundamental attribution here, no, I'm not seeing any examples here.
You just went too deep. That's all. We're not on that PhD level with you. At that real doctor level, we're not there quite yet. So
Dan mentioned, seems to me the search part 2 is an example. Dan, I'm thinking here, if you're responding to a previous comment or talking about the fundamental attribution error, the search is one of my favorite episodes of TNG because it explains the makeup limitations of Star Trek so well. I really like that explanation. I'm trying to think if there's a lot of misjudging why other people might be here, why this alien race might have even created this chase, this search project, and at the end when it's revealed, it was our great hope that the only way you could solve this puzzle is by working together, and if you've done that, you've overcome all these differences, and it's kind of like our children have sort of come into their own, and people kind of look at each other and like, these Cardassians are like, I thought there'd be some great information here, and the Romulans are just very stoic in their disappointment. I think Picard might be the only one who's really excited about this massive discovery here. But that's one of my
But then the Romulan does go out and get all Mark Lenard and say, oh well, maybe we could someday work together.
Yes.
There's this. It totally explains, between the Romulan commander 100 years earlier and this guy, it totally explains the whole Romulan underground movement. Like, who are the...
It's kind of like the Romulan says, maybe in a few movies after Star Trek Nemesis, we might be able to work together. And then, that black hole thing happens, and I guess not. Yeah, sorry, Romulans. Sorry about that, Romance. So, Larry, that's my counselor's log. I'm going to talk a little bit about what to do about the fundamental attribution error in a moment. But before we get to the away mission, we're taking a detour into the K3 factor. So
what do you mean
Larry,
a detour? This is always on the plan. This is part of the route.
No, it is a part of the plan. Yeah, it's all part of the plan. Absolutely. Take us away with the K3 factor. What do you have for us this week, Larry?
Yeah, so if you're new with this, the K3 factor is, as you saw there, the only bit out of the original series that refers to mental health. It's a indicator on McCoy's BioBed monitor. And for us, the K3 factor is where we take our theme and our topics today, and we do a Trekland style deep dive. So here's the thing. I was kidding if you heard me a little bit earlier. We were talking about Living Witness. We had the great moment there where there's a whole reinterpretation of history going on with all the human bodies on the set. But there's also another image, if Dr. Ali will indulge me, of the Kyrian Museum from that show. This was late in, this episode was late in, I want to say, 5th season. I'm looking at
right here, Larry.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah. The Kyrian Museum. It's a wonderful. It's a huge for TV. It's a huge set. That's not faking anything. That's all built. If you know about those skylights and that staircase wraps around and comes down, and there's all that bottom. The DP enjoyed that. That's way. That's a huge set for the TV scale.
They made that. Wait, did they made that for Voyager?
That was that was for the Living Witness episode. Yeah. That was the end of season 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4. I was right. So this was like 95, 96, 97, 98. Duh, Larry, think about it. My point here is that was built huge, and they splurged money on it because they got to borrow from another account. They got to borrow from the account for the movie budget for Insurrection, which was being built and shot at the same time, because the plan was, and Richard James and his art team by then, Richard James was the art director for, after Herman left, Herman Zimmerman.
Herman Zimmerman? Yeah.
Yeah, different Herman. Herman Zimmerman only did The Next Generation after doing movies since 5. The first year. He got the show launched, went off to do the movies. Richard James came in and oversaw the art department as production designer through all of the rest of Next Gen and then all of Voyager. He got to custom design Voyager. Herman did the movies and then came in and was the DS9 art designer and then Enterprise. Mm-hmm. So Richard James's team designed this set, late fourth season of Voyager, totally with the understanding that they were going to amortize the cost out because it was going to figure into Insurrection. And I think I've got another image for you there. So if people didn't realize this, and there's when they've wrecked the Kyrian Museum at the end, right? That's kind of the upshot of Living Witness. So right. The next slide, please.
Here it comes.
Boom. So there's poor old Admiral Dougherty in the Sonah Body Lab, but the Sonah Body Lab set, you can see the stairs there.
Oh.
The reason that was the reason they got such a big budget to build that for a mere TV episode. See?
It's the same.
It's the same. Redressed on the surface.
Fake.
It's the same. It's not a fake. Anyway, there's your K3 thing. That's it's a case of we're going to spend more money on this on the TV, and that was the synergy that you had. That as long as movies and TV shows were separated, you didn't. If you're going to blow a ton of money on a series like Discovery, you're just blowing a ton of money on it, which they did. And YouTube is only picking up the tab one season. But that's a case of back when
Netflix.
Everything was all together on the lot, they would pull things like that.
Larry, this is, I think
Did I surprise you? This is the test.
You did. I didn't know this one. I didn't know this one. So
it's a small K-through, very specific, but I thought I would throw that in.
I don't know in the comment section if there's a little going back and forth between like a little confusion over the fundamental attribution error. So I'm going to use it as an example here, and I'll explain it again. But in general, I'm very not in favor of giant corporations. However, when it comes to Star Trek, my mind will make all these explanations. Well, it's actually great for Paramount and CBS to have this integration when it comes to Star Trek, because they can do things like this: share sets, share budgets, have a lot more integration in much the same way that Marvel has now. Star Trek had this way back in the 90s and 2000s.
Pioneered it.
They pioneered it, yeah, the shared universe idea, and of sharing budgets, sharing sets. There's a lot of examples of this happened with the motion, the original series crew with some of their movies sharing sets with the Next Generation, and then the Next Generation sharing sets with the movies. There was a lot of back and forth happening there. So I think not only did it add to a similar visual look, but it also helped them save money. And so this is kind of the fundamental attribution error, is like, for ourselves or for stuff we like, we find a lot of ways to explain what's going on. We find a lot of ways to defend what's going on. But for others and people we don't know well, we don't have all those explanations, and we tend to blame them for what they're doing. So all the other media corporations are bad for having these giant conglomerates. But when it comes to Paramount, it's just like they're telling better Star Trek stories. We find ways to explain it. So that's an example of that helps out.
It sounds like you're saying you retcon the reality you know.
Yes.
You mistrust the reality. You don't retcon the reality you don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, Vulcans. They're really good at rationalizing what they do, right? It's not, a lie, Spock, an omission, right? Like, they're very good at finding these rationalizations for what they do.
I merely exaggerated.
Yes, another good example. When it comes to ourselves, we very much think like Vulcans. We find ways to rationalize our own behavior. But when it comes to others, we act in more of a Andorian in Star Trek Enterprise kind of way. Really distrustful and blaming the other person and thinking that they don't have the best intentions for what they're doing. So that, if that helps. I think that's a great one, Larry. I like that K3. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I will file the Tellarite. Sometime in the future, I'll say, okay, you forced me to go to the Tellarite when I filed away back in 2020.
I love what Brian just said. Vulcans, because logic. No, really. Oh, and now we're getting all the great Star Trek.
Are we just going to say hailing frequencies? Go for it, bam.
Well, I've got an away mission. Hold on
that's right.
now.
Sorry.
Speaking of detours.
Sorry. I should study the structure of the show a little more intensely, I guess.
I was going to do Doherty out. Bad impression there, but all right, let's jump into the away mission.
Yeah, that.
This is the part of the show. That. This is the part of the show. Apparently, you should take a drink when one of your hosts forgets what comes next, as apparently both of us have done today. This is the part of the show where I give you at least one tip on how you can apply some of what we're talking about to your own life. So when it comes to misjudging motivations, the away mission is not about how can you better misjudge other people's away motivations. It's quite the opposite. So one thing that I'd like to share with people, for so long my career has been about understanding where other people are coming from. And I've met and worked with a lot of different people from a lot of different places with a lot of different challenges and a lot of different strengths. And Larry, I learned a long time ago that I am absolutely horrible at making assumptions about other people and why they do different things. I learned this very early in my career.
That's probably a good safety factor, because now you're not depending on that.
Well, exactly. And that's why I've come to accept that. But like, as I hear people's stories, the very first time I meet them, I I start to form ideas in my head, or at least I did very much early in my career. I started to form ideas in my head about why they made this action, why they went to this place, why they acted in A way instead of B way. And I learned as I started to ask people more questions to understand the situation they're in that I was always wrong. Always wrong. And I have the privilege of knowing that as a psychologist working in this way, but I think most people don't get the benefit of being able to work with someone in a completely confident or confidential way where they're able to kind of share honestly with someone who's trained to listen in a very compassionate way. Like that doesn't happen to a lot of people. So what I want to help everyone to do is to be able to listen like a therapist a bit more in your life. Doesn't mean in every situation you're in, of course not. But it does mean with the people that you want to understand better and with the people you don't want to misjudge their motivations, there's some very simple things that you can do that are going to help you to get better at that, become a better listener. I have a video, if anyone wants to share this in the comments section, otherwise I can do it later. I got a video called How to Listen Like a Therapist on my YouTube channel. If anyone wants to share that, How to Listen Like a Therapist, that'll be awesome. That video kind of dives into these skills in a lot more detail. But the basics are, number one, Larry, when you're talking to someone else, the most important thing you can do when you want to really try to understand where they're coming from is just reflect back what they're saying. What this means...
Wait, reflect back what they're saying?
Yeah, reflect back what they're saying. Larry, you have some experience doing this. all it really means, you've worked.
This isn't therapy psychology training. This is what journalists do in an interview. Hopefully,
that's what I was about to say. What I was about to say. A good journalist actually has a lot in common with a good therapist, and a good therapist has a lot in common with a good journalist too. The differences are
they see a lot of sickos. No, I'm kidding.
The difference I was going to say is journalists are more interested in the truth and understanding the truth, and a therapist is more interested in understanding your experience and is a little bit less interested in the quote truth, the objective truth, whatever that might be. But the more you're able to reflect back in your own words what the other person is saying, it gives the other person an opportunity to say, no, that's not quite right, or actually it was like this. So Larry, if you were telling me a story about, oh, I got really angry at this other person, they said this, and I would say, okay, so you spoke to this other person and they said these things, and then that made you really upset, and you might say, well, no, it wasn't that part that made me upset, it's about this thing that made me upset. So I'm not saying reflect back like verbatim, you say every word back, but in your own understanding, sharing what the other person has said to you gives them a chance to check in and to really pinpoint what the actual experience is. That was number one. Number two skill for listening like a therapist is to ask them, what's this like for you? I hate the question of how does this make you feel? Larry, that's a stupid question most of the time, because most of the time we don't know how it makes you feel.
But it's what all the counselors on TV say.
I know. And Troy asked that, and Esri asked that, and I hate it. I hate it. Because it's not a very helpful question. What's more helpful is, what is this like for you? Or what was going on inside of you at that time?
You need to offer a psych webinar for the WGA, for the Writers Guild. Therapy writing mistakes you're making and how to
and how to write it better. Yeah, because those tropes are just they're not that interesting either. I would love to, Larry, make that happen. I will beam into that webinar. Quite literally, because that's the only way we can interact with each other now. I can't actually be in person. But asking, what was that like for you? What was going on inside of you? Some people are better at describing physical experiences, like, well, I felt really hot inside. Some people are really good at describing an emotion and might say, well, I got really angry. And some people might say, I just didn't like it. And all of that is fine. And all of that's going to help you to better understand what the experience was. So it's those two simple things: reflecting back what you're hearing and asking someone, "What was that like for you when this happened? What was that like? What was going on for you when that person said this thing?" That just those two basic skills will get you so much closer to really understanding someone else's motivations and where they're coming from. That's it. That's all I've got for the away mission today.
That's all you've got for the away mission today?
That's all I've got. Yeah. And Jared says, I know videos on my channel. Jared, I've got a video that's so close to being finished, and I was going to hit publish, but then this other big opportunity came up to work on another video, and that's going to be out soon. There's some cool stuff in the cooker, Jared. You're going to see some cool stuff very soon. I promise.
So you cook your videos. I was wondering because you're churning them out. See, I just do the
I use a slow cooker,
shelf
Larry.
kind on the cookie tray overnight, and yours are coming out a lot faster than mine are. So
apparently, I use a slow cooker, a very slow cooker for my videos. Oh my gosh. All right, so folks, we are going to open up the hailing frequencies. Which
I'm
means
45 minutes behind here, going back to the scroll, but lots of good stuff. Everybody's been. I feel like we've had a bump in turnout today here live.
Today's been awesome. We've had the
a lot of folks
section
come back home to roost.
There's a lot of really cool comments coming in. Libby says you should use an Instapot. Now I'm like, that's such like, are we talking about Instagram now? Like I'm like, yeah, but I should for my videos definitely use an Instapot. Gosh, so many.
Cairo has a good one here. Actually, an example for our theme today.
Yeah.
Robert says an example, and it's and I was trying to. We didn't. I got off talking about the Sarek of Discovery there a little bit, but as far as our theme today on Discovery and Picard, one thing, I mean, First Contact, it wasn't First Contact, but the whole origin of Discovery, the Battle of the Primaries, and it's so muddled because it's kind of like a muddle on top of a muddle is the spark that started the Klingon War and Burnham misjudging.
Oh, the binary, yeah.
You know, it's a perfect example of mistaken intentions and misjudged motivations starting a war, much less, a lesser conflict. But it's like Discovery is full of misjudged everything up and down the line. But he says his point he makes here is an obol for Sharon from Discovery season 2 with the sphere. They think the sphere is trying to attack them, and all it's trying to do is give them its data before it dies.
Oh yes, that's a great example.
Sorry, I've only been through Discovery like a couple of times, not 47. So yeah,
that's a really great example, Larry. And Cairo, yes. You see, the problem for me with the newer Trek is a lot of these episodes I've only seen once. And so it's very easy for me to forget some of the details, like that gem of an episode, because especially with this serialized storytelling, that episode was kind of I don't want to say it was a one-off. I mean, it definitely played out in the larger story arc, but it was its unique thing, and I just completely forgot about it. But that's a great example.
Well, I thank you. I just thought I would repeat it. I like so I was talking about Sarek being an outcast in his culture, which has nothing to do with our theme today, but I'm glad I kind of put. And Libby says she and Jared are talking here about leaving home, and Libby says she grew up in a small Arkansas town with a long history of affirmed bachelors and spinster lady roommates, and said everyone knew, we just knew enough to mind our own damn business. So anyway, I just thought, thank you for that. But yes, Dan Lecky says, who's responsible for fleshing out the Tellarites? Manny Cotto and Mike Sussman. Yes, who I found out were old Tellarite fans too. Not so much a Tellarite fan, but why it's the underdog. It's like, why do we not? They're a founder, We don't know anything about them. What is wrong with
know.
this picture?
But
This is
but
not
they're
fair.
not that kind. They're not the other kind of founder.
In
The
another
ones who,
battle for Star Trek social justice, where hashtag time for Teller Prime.
Zahir says Larry's referencing to the Discovery rehash of the episode where Geordi weans the space baby off the Enterprise's energy. That's another really great episode here. You soured the milk! Wow, that was horrible. That was a horrible impression. But it was a baby who wanted milk, not an alien that was attacking the Enterprise.
Right.
It's
the Leah Brahms episode.
Yep.
The second
holodeck one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting about that episode, Larry, it gets referenced later with Scotty when Geordi is retelling it, but it also gets referenced later where Leah Brahms, the real Leah Brahms, comes to the Enterprise.
Galaxy.
The Next Generation, Galaxy. The Next Generation has these wonderful moments where, way before serialized storytelling, where past episodes do play out in different ways in future episodes and future stories.
They actually did it a couple of times, third season of the original series, which they never really did before standalones. It's just that half the time when they would refer back, they would it's third season and Fred Freiberger, and they would get something wrong. They would like in the middle of fake, Kirk Janis's court martial and Turnabout Intruder to the last one. And he's going to Janice and Kirk's body is going to sentence Kirk and Janet's body Janice's body to death. And Sulu and Chekhov actually have a line in the scene, and they jump up and they say, "But you can't do that. The death penalty is expressly prohibited, forbidden." And then Chekhov says, "Yes, only under General Order Number 6." And you want to go, "It's General Order Number 7." It's like, oh poor third season Star Trek. You've got it close, but there were times when they would, once or twice refer back. They got to what they were doing, like, baby, it's the late 60s and we're just revolutionizing TV format writing.
There's
breaking the barrier between standalone shows.
This makes me think about so this is a little bit of a stretch, Larry, not a stretch like insurrection stretch, but a little stretch of our topic over here. But bear with me.
That's a new one.
Yeah. But bear with me. We're talking about misjudging motivations, right? And I think, Tim had this comment about Lower Decks this week dropped a line about Captain Kirk and a 50-foot Vulcan. Does that now make the original series, the animated series, officially canon, right? And so there's all these discussions about...
It's been canon for a while.
It's been canon, right. There's all these discussions about what's canon, and canon getting itself wrong in that example that you just gave about season 3 of the original series, kind of misremembering General Order number. They said 7, but it was 5, or they said 6 and it was 4. What was it?
I think they said 6 and it should have been. It's supposed to be 7.
Yeah. So this is I'm gonna paraphrase our good friend John Champion from an episode of Mission Log related to the animated series. I think they did a big recap as they were finishing the animated series watch. And if anyone isn't familiar, John Champion does Trek Files with Larry, another Roddenberry podcast, but the Mission Log podcast has been going through the entire Star Trek canon, every episode, looking at the morals, meanings, and messages behind every episode. Great show. If you like our stuff, you'll like their stuff too. Anyways, I believe it was John who said canon is not a prison. Canon is a tool, and canon is something that helps us to tell stories. It's not this place that we imprison ideas and storytelling in. It's purely just a tool for us. So I always like that explanation of canon, and helping us to get to a place of understanding that the writers are doing the best they can to tell interesting stories in this vast universe. And sometimes it's very hard to do. It's hard to tell a new Star Trek story without moving things around to make it easier to tell that new story that you want to tell. There's a lot of Star Trek out there, and sometimes people will mess up canon. Sometimes people will change things. And as a fan, that's very hard, but let's try to understand what the writers are dealing with. The writers are trying to tell new, interesting stories in a world where there's been hundreds of stories told. And if you bring up the novels and comic books and all the other stuff, thousands of Star Trek stories have been told. That's a pretty big challenge. So when it comes to misjudging motivations, having a little bit of intellectual humility, having a little bit of flexibility, having a little bit of compassion towards writers, that's something that's always helped me when I've struggled with these type of canonical issues. Like at the top of the hour, Larry, or at the top of the show, when I was talking about some of my frustration with so many Enterprise D references in Lower Decks, your perspective on it actually like completely changed how I'm thinking about that now. And now it makes me think, okay, I understand this. I can get with this.
So in Trekland, Dr. Trek years ago came up with a hashtag. The hashtag to handle all this, because it's what I used to do. My attitude, I think I said it today, my attitude was, it's on film. That ship has sailed. Now what are we going to do about it? Yes, next time maybe prep better. So anyway, years ago I came up with a hashtag, texture not trivia. So that when you see something that goes against whether it was your own personal headcanon or whether it's something you thought everybody agreed on. And somehow this new junior writer on the latest show got something past everybody, and it got aired and filmed, and nobody along the way caught it. And so now it's there. So do you run around screaming and go, they screwed this up, they screwed this up? Or are you going to say, okay, and take a page from the best acting notebook, directing, writing notebook, and go, you know what? Sometimes it's the exception that proves the rule. Sometimes, if it's a drama, then the comedic moments really give texture. Sometimes in a comedy, it's the dramatic, when you go against the grain, when it's the all those metaphors. So when something sometimes goes wrong, so in the case I just said, Turnabout Intruder, Chekhov says, only under General Order Number 6. Poor Chekhov. He was so excited and upset that he said the wrong, order number. That's all you have to do. The famous one about, and it's because things were done. Scotty is, at one point, Scotty says, when he's revived from relics, and he says, oh, I thought maybe you were Captain Kirk himself coming to rescue me. But then, later we film it with seeing that he knows Kirk died on the Enterprise B, and people say, well, why didn't he blah, blah, blah? Well, because we say, well, my God, Scotty has been in his transporter loop for 80 years or whatever, and he's just muddle-headed. He's just going back to the muscle memory that is the most strongest for him. So anyway.
Or maybe that was his wish and desire, that Captain Kirk was still alive and he would be the one rescuing him. I mean, we've all been in those kind of places where we've longed for someone who's no longer with us.
Well, this whole discussion, this whole post-discovery outrage time, there's lots of sincere critics and criticisms and really structural things I wish they hadn't done, but I also understood why. And like I said, I'm just resigned to it. Now let's just go explain and fix it, which is something we've done up and down Star Trek over. You have different generations of creators doing things that don't know. You have different access to facts. When Next Generation was starting, my homemade concordances, which is a takeoff on Bijo's concordance, which was just, what are the Star Trek facts we see on air? Let's get our arms around them. That's what her concordance was. That's what mine were. That's what the encyclopedia, that's what memory of. That's what canon is. And my metaphor for canon is guardrails. It's like we're gonna have this road, and whether it's a cow path, or whether it's a 2-lane county road or a 2-lane highway, or now it's a 4-lane divide. I mean, now we've got a 6-lane freeway. Whatever it is, we need guardrails to keep us on the road so that we get from A to B without going in the ditch or going
Yeah.
off the bridge. Now, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that the guardrails mean we're stuck. We're in a straitjacket, or like you said, we're in a prison.
Yeah.
We have maneuvering room. And you know what? Occasionally, there's too much traffic. There's a lot of demand on this road, and we have to add some lanes.
Yeah.
We're still going to go the same way. We're still going to avoid accidents, but we still need we just move the guardrails wider. And now we've got an 8-lane freeway both directions. It's a huge thing. It's a huge franchise, but we still have, and guardrails keep us going the right direction, but they let us maneuver.
And
so
you know what? You can have an off ramp. You can have an off ramp to a whole nother highway, like the Kelvin timeline, that can take you in a different direction. And it's both similar and it's different. And that's okay. You don't have to take that off-ramp if you don't want to.
But when you take that off-ramp to the Kelvin highway, that highway will have guardrails too.
Yes.
To keep you on that highway. There's a lot of paradigm fuzziness anymore that I just go, how is this so complicated? Canon is just the collection of facts so you know where the hell you are. So that when you do, hopefully, if you do make a change or you do add some texture, then you're doing it intelligently. You know, it's like I have to know what all the rules are when I break one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and I do it intelligently or whatever. Yeah.
I like Jared's comparison. We've been crossing the streams a lot, so why not? Let's do another one here. But did the 1967 Doctor Who production staff actually think that the show would still be going in 2020 when they introduced the 13 regeneration limit in a bit of a dialogue? No, they didn't. And from the other angle, did people really think that BBC would bring a multi-million-dollar, let me bring it back up, a multi-million-dollar franchise to a halt because one long line of dialogue from 40 years ago? No, absolutely not. You know, Larry, I think this is something you've done a great service to the fandom when you have been able to have these interviews and dialogues and discussions about people who are involved in the creation of this. Of Star Trek and the fans and how we understand it. Like, you know, for a long time I really hated Star Trek Generations. I just disliked the movie. And then two things happened. One is I started to do some research and read more from Brandon Braga and Ron Moore about the process of making that movie and the timeline they had. They were writing All Good Things and Star Trek Generations like around the same time. It was a very tight timeline. They had a lot of studio notes about all the things that need to happen in the movie. We need to tie up the Duras sisters. We need to destroy the Enterprise D. We need Kirk, but we also need Picard. We want this handoff. You know, we want all these things to happen. It's very hard.
Long list, yeah.
It's a very long list. The same people who wrote All Good Things wrote Star Trek Generations and wrote Star Trek First Contact. So let's have a little bit.
And they took 1.5 years to write Generations, and they had to write All Good Things in like 2 months.
Right. So
they're totally different.
As you hear the stories, this gets back to the fundamental attribution error. They're bad writers. Well, let's look at the context of what was happening and the experience that they had of writing Star Trek Generations. And when I did that, I was able to approach Star Trek Generations in a very different way. Similarly, one of our mutual panelists from the very first Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars panel, my colleague Dr. Drea Ledamenti, when she first watched Generations, we were having a text back and forth, and she said, "I love this movie as a metaphor for time and how we can get stuck in different moments and how we can get unstuck." And I think the Nexus is a beautiful metaphor for all this stuff. And I'm thinking, are you serious? Where is this coming from? But she was approaching Generations as someone who didn't have all this years. She just first watched Generations just a few years ago, and she was approaching it outside of all the anticipation of what's going to happen if Picard
she had
and
no
Kirk
Trek
ever
baggage.
meet.
Right. Well,
no Trek baggage. No canon.
That's why
baggage.
I say people that come back to first run Star Trek viewing is obviously a wonderful thing. I remember thinking when Mr. Worf fire at the end of Best of Both Worlds. Oh my God! And nobody will ever have, and having to wait 3 months. No one will ever have to deal with that again. But Discovery and Picard they're having to wait 9 months. Okay, that's just one tiny thing. everybody, if something is good enough to last more than one airing, the upside is it's good enough to be around. The downside is that it's going to, or not downside, but everyone's going to have a different experience with it. And if it's the more universal, like I said this the other day, like Shakespeare, the more people are going to watch it over time. And they will always be bringing where they are in their own life, where the world is at the moment, and now the media. Are you just watching it as number 47 out of the 82 you're binge watching today? Versus someone. So all those kind of experiences bring something different to it. I want to throw one more thing in. I know we're at like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Part of this whole fandom reaction to it's a mistake. I mean, yes, I get disappointed. I've told you my whole thing about Bones and the. In
2009,
yes.
And I've told you, and I love that line. The line that you hate, universe. I love.
I know, and that's an alternate universe, and it's fake anyway, and nobody cares. It's okay. It can be wrong. It's a fake universe. It's not Prime, I should say. But to me, that means if it's not Prime, then it's a fake universe.
It's a fake!
So, 7th season, Next Generation. I'm doing my end-of-the-year interviews with everybody. Sitting down with Rene Echevarria, who I love. He's been a guest on Trek Files. He's a wonderful guy. Did his first show when they finally convinced him to write for Star Trek and move to LA was The Offspring with Lal. So that was his first Trek script. So there you go. No, he's writing Dark Page, which is about Loxana and Troy, and Deanna finds out. The upshot is she finds out she had a little sister who was older than her, who died before she was, or when she was a baby. She had no memory of this older sister, 4 or 5 years older, who drowns, right? That's the upshot of the show. And as I watched it airing, the night it aired, Mr. Holm is not an on-screen character, but Deanna talks about writing home to Beta Z to get some documents and images and material from Mr. Holm at home about her mom's early life, right? Her dad's dead, obviously. And so she's trying to help her mom's in a coma or whatever, a betazoid coma. But she writes Mr. Holm to get some early material from before she was born, when Loxana was younger. And I remember watching the episode and I went, uh-oh. I had an uh-oh moment. And so at the end of the year, when I'm sitting with Renee, and this is such a take on when I watch the YouTubers now who have legitimate points. It's like, guys, this is like the White House press corps. It's like, are you going to come in and bash somebody in the head? Well, there's times I wish I had that feeling. But are you going to maintain your communication channel so that you can get to tough questions, right? Because I'm sitting there, we've gone through the whole year, all the episodes. So now we're doing Dark Page. It may be the last one of the year. We get through how did this come, the whole making of bit. So we get to a point and I go, so Renee, and he's known me for a couple of years now. And we've done the first edition of the book and all this. So we have a relationship here. So Renee, the whole thing about Mr. Holm, being there before Deanna was born, are we postulating that he was Loxana's manservant before Mr. Zelo? Because in Haven, when you first meet Loxana and Mr. Holm, Deanna doesn't know who he is because Loxana has just hired him. And Deanna says, what happened to Mr. Zelo? And she goes, oh, he got too flirtatious and forward and I had to fire him. And Renee just looked at me with the classic deer in the headlights look. He was like, oh. Like, oops. But kids, this is before Memory Alpha. This is before was before I was doing I was doing my books, but Renee just did. They didn't think about it, and it was aired, and no one on staff caught that. But it was like a slap in the face to me because I very much remember that moment.
Yeah.
And so it's just a case of, okay, but did I sit there and scream at Renee for getting that wrong and messing up canon? It's like, no. So now we have to go, okay, well, did she have Holm hired and he went away and Deanna was born and all she knew was the guy before Holm? Or maybe there were two,
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a case, but it's a case of, it's very totally correct to bring it up and go, so there's this, and this. And in this case, sometimes writers go, oh yeah, and we're going to do this. Or maybe you're the fifth person to bring it up, and by the time you talk to them, they've got something in line.
Yeah, they got something.
But
in
this
mind.
is a case where I got to go. I wasn't interested in playing gotcha. I just wanted to go. By the way, sometimes I feel protective. I feel very protective, Star Trek. By the way, Renee, when people show up to ambush you over this, you might want to have an answer ready. I didn't say that, but that's the thing, you know. And sometimes it's kind of like, I don't know, Larry. Do you have what should we do? And I was like, well,
I like Cairo's headcanon here is Lwaxana was so heartbroken about the incident that she fired Hom and later rehired him when she needed someone again.
See, it's very easy to do that. And look what we just did. We just gave 5 more layers of texture to something because of a mistake. Yeah, that's what text, not trivia, means.
I think what a big part of today's whole episode, to bring it to a close here, is really having a lot of flexibility and taking the time to try to understand where someone's coming from. We talked about a lot of examples of that today, and we talked about some tools on how to do that, and being a little bit slower to pull the judgment. I think everyone is doing the best they can, and that includes writers who are trying to do the best they can to tell a fun, interesting story, you know. So I think that's a good place for us to bring it to an end. So Larry, I'm going to play what's known as the sad music at the end of the show here.
You should try playing the happy music at the end just to see if it's any different, if there's any better.
So Larry, where can folks? You've got a lot happening tomorrow. Please talk about what's happening tomorrow.
Yes, and I didn't mention. Can you clip that up, everybody? I really want to invite you. If you can't stay all 3 hours with us, drop by between 3 and 6 Pacific time, between 6 and 9 Eastern time. So the Improvised Generation here in LA, which is a wonderful, you can watch a lot of their back catalog. They're kicking off. They're going virtual on Twitch. They're going to do improv virtually from their Zoom boxes, which is going to be awesome. But their launch event has gone virtual. It's a 3-hour, not panels, not adding to your Zoom fatigue, but we're having a cocktail party. So Eliza Pearl and I are co-hosting, who's their captain. Look at all these folks you know, some other folks who come from all different aspects, and it's going to be very laid back, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's Twitch. You don't need a Twitch account to be there. You can bop over. You need a Twitch account to be in the chat, and we'll have chat running. We'll have moderators pulling questions out for us. None of these are like hour-long panels. They're all like 10, 15-minute bits. So anyway, I'm very excited. I'm excited they asked me to come co-host this.
That's a lot of folks, Larry. That's very exciting.
That's a lot of folks from a lot of different stripes. Yeah, we have gamers. We've got podcasters. A lot of folks I don't know well. Some of them I've known for 20, 30 years. John and Armin and Dan Curry and Kitty. So anyway, I think this is also Tamlin Tomita's first public event of any kind, who played Commodore O in Picard. So she's got a long acting resume, but her first, we think it's her first Trek event since the show finalized during pandemic. So anyway,
I'm going to ask our audience if someone could post a link to twitch.tv/outpost13. I hope folks can join Larry there tomorrow.
My regular Twitter is at Larry Nemecek. LarryNemecek.com is my website, and there's links also to it tomorrow, and also to our open house coming up end of October. But anyway, yes, that's where you can find.
I'm at Mattu, folks. Happy to have you here today, and Larry, I can't wait for next week. Until then, live long and prosper, folks.
Hey, everybody. Trek well.